Speaker for the opportunity to speak on this excise-equivalent duties table amendment bill. This indeed is a very important part of the jigsaw puzzle in reducing smoking in New Zealand, and it is, as other speakers have said, an incredibly important part in doing that. May I pay tribute to the Minister, the Honourable Tariana Turia, for her long expressed efforts in making this come to fruition today, along, of course, with the national government, because Cabinet has agreed to equalise the tobacco excise by weight, resulting in a one-off 14% rise in excise and duties on loose tobacco as used in roll-your-own cigarettes. It's further agreed to increase the tobacco excise across all tobacco products by 10% immediately, and then a further 10% in January 2011 and January 2012. And this excise and excise equivalent duties table amendment bill is sponsored, as I said earlier, by Tariana Turia. It is interesting, Mr. Speaker, to note that tobacco taxation has been shown to be one of the most effective means of encouraging people to quit smoking or at least cut down. And these were the very words of Annette King back in 2000 when a similar bill was passed under urgency. I note, Mr. Speaker, and acknowledge that the Maoris Affairs Select Committee is currently carrying out an inquiry into tobacco control, and I understand that they have had many submissions that have supported the tool of an excise tax. Furthermore to that, the World Health Organization recommends countries tax tobacco to discourage tobacco consumption. So there is a lot of evidence to show that this mechanism has worked, and in the past, if one goes through the various times when this has happened in New Zealand, indeed there has been a decrease in taxation. Mr. Speaker, I think it is really important to recognise that the ban on smokings in bars and restaurants has become widely accepted in New Zealand, and patrons largely welcome these changes. And I must say, I was very much for that move, and there are people through up and down New Zealand who say that this is extremely welcome. Mr. Speaker, this is not a debate about choice. Smokers will still have a choice to smoke. And I must say it is worthwhile just bringing in the libertarian argument to this, because there is no doubt that basic libertarian philosophy would say as much freedom as possible, provided it does no harm. And there is no question that not only does direct smoking do harm, but of course second-hand smoking does considerable harm, and therefore this is one of the great public health pieces of legislation that we can implement to cut down on what is a very, very concerning spectrum of conditions. There is a combination of efforts that have been made to quit smoking, and these include the efforts over a variety of years in a whole number of ways. But the impact of excise increase on smoking is quite dramatic. A combination of triggering new quit attempts, preventing quit relapses, and dissuading new smokers. It's estimated that after 10 years, 40,000 fewer smokers and 300 fewer premature smoking-related deaths a year will occur. And after 20 years, 80,000 fewer smokers and 600 fewer premature smoking-related deaths a year. It is interesting to note that the prevalence of smoking and tobacco consumption has dropped in New Zealand over the last 50 years. However, these declines slowed significantly since 1990 and in the case of consumption have stalled since 2003. I do want to again acknowledge the very fact that the Smoke-Free Environments Enhanced Protection Amendment Act was a challenging piece of legislation at the time, but indeed has been much accepted throughout this country, and that this present legislation today is being welcomed, as far as I can tell, by all parties. It is very heartening to have heard the speech of Ruth Dyson, where she supports the government in this initiative. It is interesting historically that the link between tobacco and smoking and disease was not actually proven until the 1960s, when Sir Richard Dole, from an epidemiologist from Oxford, came through with the quite unequivocal evidence-based research to show those links. And of course, more recently, this has also been shown with marijuana smoking, where not only does it affect the respiratory system, with lung cancer, with pharynx cancer, with lip cancer, but also it affects an increased number of heart disease, an increased number of strokes. It badly affects those with chronic obstructive respiratory disease, and also it affects unborn babies who can be profoundly affected with intrauterine growth retardation, and of course young infants who can have chronic chest infections made much worse if they are brought up in a smoking environment. And I saw this firsthand as a pathologist in the United States. I would suggest to anyone, if they want to have an abrupt session or image to stop them quit smoking, to go and cut open a body of someone who has died from chronic obstructive airways disease, a chronic smoker, they will see a black lung. It is a horrific sight. Even more so, later on as a specialist obstetrician, I had the spectre time and time again of seeing growth-retarded babies who had mothers who had smoked heavily throughout their pregnancy, and clearly given their infants a very poor start in life, unable to achieve their full potential. So, Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt that this bill has got a very, very solid basis behind bringing it into the House today. There are indeed concerns about whether it affects the lower socioeconomic group more than others, but the government has put in place considerable amount of money on efforts to help people quit. In fact, 57 million this year on tobacco control and smoking cessation services. This includes nicotine replacement products and prescriptions to help smokers quit. And the bulk of this funding funds Quitline and other targeted specialist quit smoking services focusing on Maori, Pacific and pregnancy services. There's also funding for training, education, research, monitoring, evaluation and media campaigns. The financials associated with this bill are quite staggering. The health costs are billions of dollars every year, and of course the amount raised in excise tax will go up to over $1 billion a year. But the sad thing is that smoking continues to go on when quitting smoking will prevent a whole array of crippling conditions. As I mentioned before, lung cancer, strokes and many others. Hopefully this will stop young people taking up smoking in the first place. This bill is an extremely positive move to help people stop smoking. Thank you.